I told you that I got saved when I was 19. In my mid-30s, my mother had a stroke on Halloween. And that was my midnight hour of my life. I was teaching in a Bible college. My mother, on Halloween, had a stroke, unable to speak, unable to walk. And then she was healed. One day before Mother's Day, she was able to walk again from Halloween to May. She hadn't walked. The day she walked again, we had a huge party. My family flew out from Texas. They had menudo, a big party. Next day is Mother's Day. On Mother's Day, she had a second stroke. My father was dying at the time. She didn't want to see my father. She was afraid of a second stroke. On Mother's Day, every Mother's Day, what I remember is my mother paralyzed and not being able to speak anymore. And me visiting my mother just paralyzed. That's what I remember on Mother's Day. And every Mother's Day I go and I see her and I take flowers to her grave. I take them on Saturday because I'm here on Sunday morning. Take them on Saturday so everybody can know all day that she deserves flowers all day. And then afterward, later today, I'll go and I'll spend time with her. That's my Mother's Day. That was a serious wound. About others, and I'm dealing with others. You know, my mother was in a home. They took care of her. And I've told you this story, but on Mother's Day I want to tell you. She couldn't eat anymore. She was aspirated, which means you get pneumonia. It goes down the wrong tubes. And they told me that I needed to do surgery and put something, a feeding tube in her. This is my mother. And then I didn't know what to do. And they said, she's going to die if you don't do that. And I didn't know what to do. And I asked a friend of mine named Lenny, a wonderful person. I said, what should I do? And she said, your mother already told you what to do. She had written these words. Can't really read it, but she had a little notebook. Since she couldn't talk, she had a notebook for me. And she wrote these words. I want to eat. That was my story. And so then I knew what to do. My mother wants to eat, make her happy. She'll go out eating. So right underneath there, in May the 31st, 1995, I wrote, Mom will eat. And she signed it. And I prayed to God. I hated God. 7 years I blamed him for my mother's illness. For 7 years. I hated God. I told everybody he's ugly, he plays jokes on you. I had hatred toward God. I cursed him every day. I used the worst words straight in his face. I do the worst gestures right in his face. And I said, I hate you, God. Look at what you did to my mother. And then suddenly she's nearing the end of her life. And God is all I had to call on. Can you see this little string here? She had a little pen attached to the string so she could write. And one day, the string broke and I promised her, I'll get you a string today, Mom. I kept on forgetting. So I came out of work one day and I said, God, hating God, but God, please find me a string for my mother. I looked on the ground and it was too dirty and I said, you know what, God, find me a clean string. I can't pick it up off the ground. That's my mother now. And a man walked by me and I turned around and he just walked by a newspaper rack. And I said, God, let me find a brand new clean white string. The man walks by me, I looked, and right on top of the newspaper rack where he was standing was a clean white string. Never used, like a miracle. And I picked it up and I was on Wilshire Boulevard in LA and I began to cry. I said, God, now I know that you love my mother. On June the 20th, that day, I went and saw my mother. I would always said this, I would say, I love you. And she would say, I love you too. And I go, but do you know I love you more than anything? And she would say, sí, yo te quiero mucho, which means yes, and I love you a lot. Every day, I saw her every day. I washed her face, I washed her ears, I combed her hair, I put perfume on her, I put money in her purse, I put her socks on her, I put her shoes on her. I took care of her every day. I wouldn't go home and eat dinner, I'd go straight to see my mother after work. She'd make me take her to chapel on Sundays and wear a shirt and a tie, and I'm hating God, sitting in chapel with my mother, pretending I'm into it. And then on June the 20th, I went to see her. And I told my sister, I said, you know, Annie, one of these days, it's going to be the last time I see Mom. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, do you know I love you? She goes, yes. And I go, but do you know that I love you more than anything? She goes, sí, yo te quiero mucho. And I was sick that day, so I couldn't get close to her and kiss her face and kiss her little feet. I walked out that day, and that's the last time I saw my mother. And I got a call that night at 10 o'clock. And they said, did they call you from the hospital? And I go, no. And they said, your mother expired. That's how I heard the news of my mother's death. Your mother expired. And everybody at that moment thought this, when his mother dies, he's going to blow it. that's the worst moment, going to be the worst moment of his life. In that midnight hour, I did what Paul and Silas did. I want to show you something. This is my diary, my journal I was keeping at the time. On June the 20th, at 10:40 p.m., I wrote these words, like in big bold letters. I just got the call. Mom died. She's with God now. That was my key moment in my entire life. I stood up, and instead of getting angry with God, I looked to heaven, and I said, God, thank you that you gave my mother a long life. And that was the key that stopped all the hatred and set me free from all the prison that I've been in for 7 years. I stopped and I thanked God. I had one more thing to deal with. They told me that she had aspirated. And I blamed myself. I said that she should have had the operation. I made the choice not to. She choked on her food. I was blaming myself. I went to see her in the hospital. She's already gone. And that song, Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison is playing. Can you imagine I hear just Pretty Woman and all I can think about is my mother. I'm just crying. And I go to the hospital and I run in there. And the nurse looks at me and I said, she aspirated. She goes, no, she didn't. She goes, oh no, she went very peacefully. She was looking, so I was in there, she's looking, I'm blaming myself for her death. And I walked in and I saw my mother. I saw how she went. And this is how she went. She went this. She went, and that's how she went with a happy, surprised look. She looked out the window. That's how she went. She looked out the window and it looked like she saw someone she recognized. Like, either she saw Jesus, she saw the angels, she saw my father, I don't know. But right after that, I read a book by Billy Graham. And he says sometimes the angels come, sometimes you see your loved ones. She went that way. I had also written, God, please give her a dignified death. God answered that. A couple of days later, it was her funeral. I did her funeral. The hardest thing I've ever done, do my own mother's funeral with her in the casket. Angry with God for so many years because on Mother's Day she had a stroke. My father died, but my house was stolen from her. My inheritance was stolen. My family blew apart. My Christian boss stole all my money. I had a year after her first stroke, I had a cat. I went to a prayer meeting. They prayed that the trials would stop. I got home, my cat was run over. The anniversary of my mother's first stroke on Halloween. It was all too much. And on the day, and I hated God. On the day of her funeral, I was in the shower. And this is what God did when he came and healed some of those wounds. I heard his voice. Hear this. He said, I did not cause your mother's illness. Life did. I just took care of her while she was sick. That's the God that we have. He's the one that takes care of you while you're sick. He's not the cause for the problem. He's the key that turns your problem to good. Come on, somebody get a little right. I don't want to end this. Number one, I'm going to do two things. Number one is I want everybody to close your eyes. Just close your eyes right now. Maybe you've never met this God that I'm just talking about. You may go to church, you may have heard about him, but he's